Welcome to Forum 360, a global outlook with a local view. I'm Pat Simons and I will be hosting today's program. Under the Trump administration, new limitations have been put on refugees and immigrants coming into the United States, and it has gotten a lot of media coverage. Today we are talking specifically about refugee resettlement in Akron, Ohio. With me is Liz Walters, Community Outreach Coordinator for the nonprofit International Institute of Akron. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you
We're
for
delighted
having
to
me.
have you with us today. I thought we could start out if you could tell us a little bit about your background, the job that you do for the Institute, and why you are compelled to do this work.
Sure. So I am originally from Cuyahoga Falls, born and raised in the Falls, and spent the first 10, 12 years of my professional life working in politics. I worked for our local congresswoman for a while and then went on to work for some progressive causes and really wanted to move back home to Akron and kind of settle down. My mom's aging, be home with her. And the woman who runs the International Institute, the executive director, was a grad school professor of mine, and we caught up over coffee when I moved home, and she mentioned having an opening, and I applied, and it's been an incredible professional opportunity and just a personal opportunity to get to work with the foreign-born population here in Akron because they're very hardworking and very inspirational, and it's a joy to go into work every day. I really, from a personal perspective, I grew up in a multi-generational household. My grandfather was an amateur historian, and we had his grandfather's citizenship paperwork framed on the dining room wall. And so we always reminded all of us growing up that, we were here with, because someone else worked hard, took a lot of risk, and we should make the most of all of our opportunities because there was generations of family that had worked hard to give that to us. So the mission at the Institute really spoke to me personally.
What is it that you do at the Institute?
My job at the Institute is to do all of our outward-facing relationships. So I do all of our fund development, I work with the media, I do our social media, and then nurturing the relationships with our community partners. Everyone from employers to county agencies to other folks that we do programming with.
Sounds like a busy job.
Yes.
I thought perhaps we could start right in. This is a big subject, and I thought because the public sometimes can get confused with terminology, and I thought perhaps you could define what a refugee is.
Sure.
We hear words like immigrant, migrant, illegal alien. Sometimes it all gets jumbled up. So could you explain that, please?
Sure. So the big difference between the two, the best way to describe it is that all refugees are immigrants, but not all immigrants are refugees.
Okay.
And specific to the population in Akron that the International Institute works with, we work with individuals who have been processed through the U.S. Refugee Resettlement program abroad, meaning they go through a lengthy 2-year screening process before they're admitted to the United States. Now, in some cases, immigrants that are traveling to the United States outside of that program can declare asylum at the border and go through an asylum screening process and then gain refugee status that way. But that's a different process and much harder and rarely used compared to the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program.
So refugees are a little different as immigrants, different from other immigrants who may choose to come here.
Correct.
Versus refugees are coming under duress.
Correct. So,
Okay.
And really the big difference between the immigrant and refugee definition is it's a legal status. So coming in as a refugee means that you've been declared a refugee by the United Nations High Council on Refugees. You've gone through a lengthy process, and the U.S. has said you've passed our vet. We think you'd be a contributing member to our society. We'll help you make your home in the United States. Immigrants can come to the U.S., and those in our community are usually here through an HB1 visa, which is work-related. They come through one of our big employers, or they come as a student to the University of Akron.
Okay, thank you. There are many agencies, both government, non-governmental, on an international and national arena that interact on behalf of refugees. The alphabet soup of the bureaucracy is confusing. But for the Institute here locally, who do you work mostly with and under?
Sure. So the Institute is a on-the-ground partner of another nonprofit agency called the United States Committee on Refugees and Immigrants. And it's also known as USCRI. USCRI is a contracted partner with the U.S. Department of State who undertakes refugee resettlement in the U.S. So nationally, there are 9 major agencies that do the work and then have on-the-ground affiliates. And they range from mostly several faith-based to a few that are more social work model-driven, non-religious affiliated. So the International Institute, we are a full case management social work model. We don't have a religious affiliation. But some of the larger groups that do it that people would be familiar with are organizations like World Relief, which they do have a small office in Akron, and then Catholic Charities is one of the largest resettlement bodies nationwide.
Oh, interesting. I was just going to ask you too about World Relief and about the Asian Services in Action.
Yep.
So you work with both of these agencies?
Yes.
They're non-governmental. What is the difference? Are they under the same, they're not under USCRI?
Nope.
Okay.
World Relief Akron is an affiliate of World Relief International, which is a refugee resettlement agency. It is part of the evangelical faith movement, and they take a bit of a different model, but have the same federal mandates that the International Institute does in terms of service delivery. They have a very volunteer-driven model that engages a lot of folks from different faith communities around the country. And then Asia, our Asian Services in Action, is another immigrant services agency based in our area that we partner with. And with all 3 of us, we all kind of deliver different sets of services. So we'll coordinate and discuss who goes to what program, how we can best serve the needs of an immigrant community. Asia is a great example of a place that partners with us on things like health screenings. So they run an immigrant health clinic that's funded through their nonprofit that we send our clients to on occasion.
I think that's very interesting because we see these written up in the paper. It's nice to know how you work together and that you are somewhat different.
Yes.
These social work, the case model that you're using, I think is fascinating. I had never heard that before, but it explains a lot of your services.
Yes.
So if someone is a refugee and they're in their country of origin, what paths are open to them?
So refugees that have been either living in a camp in a country of asylum or living in a city in a country of asylum can self-determine and say, I want to pursue the refugee resettlement process in the U.S. once the United Nations has declared me a refugee. Some stay in place and eke out a living in places where they don't often have right to work or access to services. And others will go into another path of resettlement. They end up living in a country or finding family in another country and going that route. But the resettlement process, whether it's to the United States or one of the other 16 countries around the globe that do this work, really offers them the best chance for an economically sound and safe return to normal life as much as possible. So that individual who's abroad, either in a camp or in a city, will step forward and raise their hand and say, I want to apply to be resettled in the United States. And they'll do a thorough 2-year case. So it's a 15-step process that ranges from an entry interview to 5 to 6 international security checks that include fingerprints and other biometric screenings like eye scans, multiple in-person interviews, a health screening. The whole process, again, takes about 2 years. And that's the U.S.'s process. Now, if they were to go in to apply for another country like Australia or Switzerland, I can't really speak to what their process is, but ours is the most rigorous.
Oh, that's very interesting. So who determines the numbers of refugees that we bring in? What are factors that influence those numbers, and how often does that change?
Sure. So every year, the President of the United States, in consultation with Congress, sets the number of how many refugees we'll take as a country. Under law, the minimum of number of folks that we admit is 50,000, and there's really no cap, so that number could go up much higher. It's been close to 70 or 80,000 under both President George W. Bush and then President Obama. The last time we had a really big influx was right after the Vietnam War. We admitted around 250,000 folks from Southeast Asia after Vietnam. Okay. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the program, President Trump has reduced that number to 50,000 annually. That's a
minimum.
That's our minimum. And that really gets divided up, right? All those 9 big national nonprofits We'll each take a number, and then they'll work with their on-the-ground partners. And our task as a local agency is to go out into the community and convene meetings with our partners, like the schools, the health clinics, the police department, all the people that would interface with the community that we serve, and have a frank conversation of what do we really think the community can accept this year, and set that number collectively and then report back to our parent agency.
Oh, interesting. I am intrigued with this process that they go through, the 13 plus steps. And the thing that really struck me is that the 12 out of a 13-step process is all done outside of the United States.
Yes.
The refugees' feet do not hit the ground here until they've been through all of that. That's the final step. So I did think that was interesting. I've heard the term that the process that we use is in a way kind of punitive, and that we actually, and I guess I'm surmising that this group may be some of the most heavily vetted and or scrutinized group that comes into the United States. Is that true?
That's correct.
I thought that's what it sounded like. So how long has the Institute been in Akron?
We have been in Akron for 100 years, 100 and a half, if you will. We celebrated our 100th anniversary last year. We started in 1916 as a project of the YWCA to serve single young women coming over from Europe who were coming to the U.S. to earn money and send it back home. And so we'd help them find safe lodging, find an appropriate job, and help them maintain their moral character. And really, since its inception, the Institute hasn't changed in that core mission of serving the foreign-born and helping them make Akron their home. That's always been at the core of what we do.
Well, I thought it was interesting because your timeline is very, very explicit about how you've evolved along with the federal laws, along with our country's history.
Yes.
So I think that's worth a look at if anybody is interested. You are a nonprofit. Where does your main funding come from?
We are funded about 60% by federal grant money and federal contract grant money. So in addition to resettlement, we also provide a full-time, low-cost legal clinic to help folks become citizens. We employ 3 full-time attorneys. We also have an employment department that helps our refugee clients obtain employment. And we also have a full-time education department that offers English classes at all levels for free to anyone, whether they came through the Institute or came to Akron in other ways.
It's a community service.
Correct. And so there's some federal funds in that work, but the majority of our work outside of resettlement is funded through private philanthropic contributions, either from community foundations or from individuals in the community.
Very interesting. This is Forum 360, and I'm your host, Pat Simons. With us today is Liz Walters, Community Outreach Coordinator of the International Institute of Akron, and we're talking about refugee resettlement in Akron, Ohio. So once the refugees arrive in our local airports, what do you do?
The moment that a refugee arrives in the airport, that is when we take over. We're responsible for picking them up. And then within 30 days, we have to hit a continuum of service. So most folks don't know that, but under federal mandate, refugees are only offered 30 days of services upon arrival. So they're expected at the end of 30 days to have employment, to be on their way to learning English, to have kind of hit all these steps necessary along the way to succeed. We can extend that casework up to 90 days, which happens frequently. 30 days for someone to adjust to a whole new country is not a very long time. To give you a contrast, for example, in a country like Australia, that period is 6 months. In Switzerland, it's 2 years.
Wow.
So we have a very tough program. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's set up very much geared towards 3 key priorities, which is family reunification wherever possible. That's often how folks end up in Akron because they have a tie here. Self-sufficiency and making sure they obtain gainful employment and aren't dependent on the Institute or other government agencies. And then finally, citizenship. If they don't obtain citizenship within 7 years, they're actually barred from ever accessing social services.
Oh, wow.
So they have to obtain citizenship within 7 years to continue really being able to have a full life here in America. So after we pick them up from the airport, we take them to an apartment that we've helped to furnish through the generous donation of community members, help support with like gently used furniture. We help stock their fridge with culturally appropriate foods. We give them a safety training in their new home. A lot of them that arrive haven't had the same kind of housing that Americans are used to. We enroll kids in school, they get an additional medical check and any vaccinations they weren't able to have access to in camp. And then we have a few more pieces to hit with things like English testing, and they get trained on how to use the metro bus. They get a 4-day in-depth cultural orientation to learn the ins and outs of American society.
4 days, a whole
4
4
days.
days.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So who pays for their airfare?
So actually they do, right? The moment they step out of that airport, they start their time in America in debt to the U.S. government. Every dollar that is spent to get them from their point of asylum to the United States has to be repaid. It's called an IOM loan, and it ranges anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 for a family of 4 to come from like the Southeast Asia region. And so after 6 months of kind of a window to adjust themselves, that loan comes due at the end of their first 6 months in the country, and they start to make payments to pay those dollars back.
Well, we do make it very strict, don't we?
We do.
The Beacon Journal in March talked in an article about brain waste, that we have people coming into our country who are not allowed to work up to their full potential. They are educated, they have degrees, they're credentialed. Are you finding that in some of your cases?
Yes, very much so. Particularly with we have a very small community of Syrians and some other folks from the Middle East and even from the Nepal region that have come in. Doctors, lawyers, scientists, teachers who just, their credentials won't be recognized here in the States. So we have 2 physicians currently working at Atlantic Tool and Die. It just seems a shame that they're not able to contribute to the community at their best skill set. Now, some states are taking really innovative approaches to this. For example, in Michigan, the state legislature has been passing a series of bills to create alternative pathways to credentialing for foreign-born individuals who have something to contribute to the state. A really famous example of a small pathway they carved out to start is called the Barber Bill, where they had a special program for foreign-born barbers to go through a certification program because becoming a barber in the United States requires a lot of hours of time and can be difficult for someone with English as a second language to find someone willing to mentor them.
Oh, that sounds like we have our work cut out for us then.
Yes.
To be more creative. The North Hill neighborhood is where most of the refugees have landed. Why is that the area of choice, and has it always been North Hill?
Sure. So there's 2 important pieces to the North Hill community and why the International Institute is there. The first is North Hill has always been the historical home for the newest residents in our community. And if you have the chance to kind of drive around on a weekend, those physical reminders of those different ethnic communities still exist in the neighborhood today. Everything from the Italian American Club, the Polish American Club, the Hibernian Club where the Irish community gathered, those are all still there and functioning on North Hill. Even at the bottom of the hill is the old jazz and blues district that really became vibrant during Jim Crow when African Americans were fleeing the South. So it's always kind of been the Ellis Island of Akron.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's been a really interesting process to watch how the newest populations are putting their mark in the neighborhood too. The second reason why North Hill is, one, the International Institute is there, and when new arrivals are in our community, they really need to be within walking distance to our building, at least for the first 30 to 60 days. And then the second reason is the schools. Akron Public Schools have been a phenomenal partner in creating a really vibrant ESL program that serves many different languages, and we've committed to them to try and keep as many children in the North Hill school cluster as we can. It makes service delivery much easier and much more cost efficient.
Oh, that's very interesting. There have been a few mixed reactions from the established previous immigrants who are now established in the neighborhood. Some of it was a little negative, and I guess one thing is the question, is there more crime because the refugees are in the neighborhood? Is there any reason that they should be concerned about them being there?
Absolutely no concern, right? And actually crime rates have gone down in the Akron Police Precinct that our communities live in. They're very self-regulating community. They have a very strong sense of responsibility and behavior, positive behavior within the community, and very much kind of monitor one another. They also have a very strong family-centric ethos. So Unlike in the United States where you have kids, they grow up, they move out, that's not the norm for a lot of our communities. It's very much a nuclear family that lives together forever, right? They stay together, they take care of one another, and they help support each other. So it's really been a positive impact for the neighborhood, and add on the fact that they're purchasing homes, they're filling in vacant blocks, they're starting community associations. They really have been a huge impact positively for the neighborhood.
I also read that the Akron Police Department has taken a very active role in interacting and being welcoming and all of that. So that's been positive. I did want to bring up this wonderful visitor's guide, We're North Hill, and it's put out by the Knight Foundation. Anyway, if anyone would like to see it, I thought it was a clever approach to a date night scenario, shopping, entertainment, and dining. But www.akronlife.com talks about how you can go to North Hill and have an international evening. Just sounded really delightful. I know that local government has tried to weigh in on some of the Trump administration limitations. Summit County came up with a resolution opposing it. Other small government cities, counties have tried to ask Governor Kasich to create a sanctuary state, which did not go through. So my question is, how much influence do we really have at the local level on these federal, I guess it's a mandate?
Yeah, the answer is very little. This is very much a federal issue. It's driven by Congress. It's driven by the president in terms of setting priorities. And I think on the other side, you saw last year there was a big move in some states to try and ban specific groups of refugees from coming into their state. States also had no authority there. So this is a very federally driven issue. But I will say, for what our local community, what the city of Akron, what the county of Summit can do, and what they have been doing such an amazing job of, is saying, we really want to be welcoming. Having immigrants and refugees in our community is a net gain for us. It's creating jobs, it's contributing to our tax base, it's helping fill in vacant homes, it's helping to stem population loss. And so they're thinking very deliberately about, this comes with opportunities and it comes with challenges. So how are we working together to make the most of the opportunities and address any challenges that might arise? And they've been wonderful at doing that work, and we're very grateful.
So that is our persona out in the public, is that Summit County and Akron are welcoming.
Yes.
Can you give me an idea of what the current status is of these changes that were made under the Trump administration? It seems like every time you pick up a newspaper or watch the news, there's a federal judge blocking something. The numbers are his to determine, so that can't be. What other things are happening?
So the answer is we don't know what we don't know, which isn't very specific, but I will say that both versions of the executive order, they signed one that was litigated and there was a stay put on it. They created a new order that was also litigated and a stay was put on it. So right now we're just waiting. We're waiting for more guidance from the courts. We're waiting for an answer, if you will, and then to see what happens next if the Trump administration chooses to pursue yet another version of the order or to make adjustments. So we just don't know.
So the sign on your wall at the Institute is be adaptable, adapt to the situation.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like you have to be turning on a pin all
Very
the time.
much so.
In closing, what is your best hope for Akron's refugee population?
Our best hope is that they continue to thrive and to contribute and to really embrace their new life. And I will say that working with the Institute is very much a privilege for all of us. And I think I would speak for all of my colleagues when I say that, because every day we really get to witness the birth of the American dream, right? A new family who came from conditions and conflict and lives that most Americans couldn't imagine. And really they come here because they want the same things we all do, which is the freedom to speak, the freedom to pray, and to raise their children with hope for a better future. And every day they find that in Akron, Ohio. And how wonderful for all of us that that's the case.
I wanted to just let folks know about where you are located. You're at 207 East Talmadge Avenue in Akron, and your website is iiakron.org. Also, if people would like to know more information about refugees and immigrants in the United States, they can go to U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, www.refugees.org, and on that website describes that rigorous process that they are required to go through. I want to thank you very much for coming today, Liz, and on behalf of Forum 360, we appreciate you coming and sharing about the Institute. This is Liz Walters, the Community Outreach Coordinator of the International Institute of Akron. I hope that we all come away with a better understanding and new information from this discussion today. This is Pat Simons for Forum 360, a global outlook with a local view. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Akronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.